Okay. Okay, thanks everyone. Welcome to the special multi-locational meeting of the Cabinet, which is held here in Penalta House and via Microsoft Teams on Wednesday the 17th of December 2025 at 1 p.m. Members of the public or press may attend in person at Penalta House or may view the meeting live via the following link, Watch Meetings Online. Okay, first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence. Councillor Nigel George, Councillor Elaine Forehead, Councillor Chris Morgan as well, apologies. Any officer apologies? No? Okay. All right then. Agenda item 2, that's the declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and or prejudicial interests in respect of any item of business on the agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Any declarations of interest at all? No? Okay then. Okay, so item agenda 3, that's the Pride in Place programme defined neighbourhood submission. That's going to be introduced by myself. Okay, the purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet approval that Bargoed, Aberbargoed and New Tredegar, as defined in paragraph 2.3, is supported as the designated neighbourhood to receive £20 million of financial support over the next 10 years under the UK Government's Pride in Place programme. The contiguous area, defined as the Bargoed, Aberbargoed, New Tredegar neighbourhood, comprises of contiguous LSOAs. That's Bargoed 1, 2, 3 and 4, Aberbargoed 1 and 2, and New Tredegar 1, 2 and 3. WIMD data has been used extensively when assessing the criteria, and we want to make it clear that we were proposing these areas which are in the north of the borough because they are determined as the areas most in need under the UK Government's criteria. So I therefore move the recommendations in 3.1. Okay, the second is Councillor Eleni Stella.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Happy to second this report and welcome this funding invested in our communities. And this is yet another example of the north of the borough receiving the investment which is needed. And once again shows that this council's commitment to residents who live in the north of the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Stenner. We have questions. First of all, Councillor Carol Andrews.
Thank you, Leader. I was just wondering if an officer could explain why was Bargoed, Aberbargoed and New Tredegar chosen as the defined neighbourhood using the criteria set by the UK Government for selecting a neighbourhood for this Pride in Place programme. Thank you.
Okay, we've got officers in the chamber and also Vicky online, but I can see Alan, you've indicated. Would you like to come in?
If I pick up on that to start with, Chair, and then maybe Vicky can add some value. I think the methodology we used, and you'll see this in one of the appendix document, is that we looked at a number of potential areas based on building contiguous sort of neighbourhoods around the top 20% LSOAs in the WIMB overall index. I think there's more detail on that in paragraph 5.15. But then we similarly then looked at the census figures, particularly at health and economic activity, and looked at which figures were perceived as being the ones which we could impact on most. But there was other filters then we took into account, and I think written into the actual report is some of the other assessment criteria we used. We assessed those areas that are in that appendix against aligning with other programmes, such as the Transforming Towns programme, the Cardiff Capital Region programme, such as the Northern Valleys Initiative, and our own strategies, such as our regeneration strategy. But if you want particulars on the WIMB data, then I'd call on Vicky to add value to that, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, Vicky, would you like to come in on this?
Yeah, so I was asked to look at at what areas could potentially be identified originally using the 2019 data, because the 2025 data was only released at the end of November. So I undertook an exercise looking at, as Alan's already said, the top 20% LSOAs, which is the lower super output areas across Caerphilly County Borough, and try to kind of develop some potential areas that could be considered for this funding. So I looked right across the county borough, top 10%, top 20%, and then obviously you have to then start looking down down the categories, as it were, to sort of make up those kind of more defined areas. So that was an exercise I did first of all. And then we looked at a few options, and as Alan's already said, looking at the other criteria that's attached to the grant about linking in with other programmes and that sort of thing, was when we came up with the defined area, so Aberbargoed, Bargoed, Newtodiga. Just looking at the WIM data as well, just to give a bit more context. So for Bargoed 4 and Newtodiga 3, which are the top two most deprived within the proposed area, Bargoed 4 and Newtodiga 3 are in the top 10% most deprived category for income, employment, health, education and community safety. So obviously there's a range of factors there that makes those two areas in particular more deprived than some of the other areas. And then following on from that, you've got other areas within the defined neighbourhood. So Aberbargoed 2, Aberbargoed 1 and Newtodiga also featuring in the top sort of 10 to 20% categories for the overall WIMD, employment, health, education, housing, community safety. So these areas are coming out kind of very strongly in terms of the overall index of deprivation and the sort of individual domains. And then what I did, obviously, when we started to sort of focus on Aberbargoed, Bargoed and Newtodiga, I went right back through all the evidence that I'd previously done and updated it to 2025. So the appendix to the report, which shows the detail of the individual areas that were originally sort of proposed or identified, have been updated to WIM 25. So they are kind of bang up to date.
Yeah. Thank you, Vicky. There is an extensive amount of data that you've compiled, and I'd like to thank you for that, and for officers as well, because it was a big exercise. But in order to go forward, it has to be evidence based, and I'm very confident that it certainly has been. Any further questions, Councillor Stenner?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I understand that a neighbourhood board will be set up to assess and identify projects. Firstly, can we be kept updated on how the board members will be selected? And also, can officers confirm that it will be this neighbourhood board and not council officers who decide the projects going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stenner. Mark Williams.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Stenner. Thanks, Leader. So the process from here on in, obviously, Cabinet will make its decision today. We then have to submit the pro forma to UK Government. Once UK Government confirm they're happy with the areas we selected, and the pro forma goes in with sort of letter of MP support, we will then be allocated a key contact in UK Government, and they will give us advice on the setting up of our neighbourhood board. So it will be the neighbourhood board that decide on expenditure. We will have representation on the neighbourhood board, although very limited. We will have to select the chair, we'll have to select the board members, and yes, absolutely, we will keep Cabinet updated in terms of that process once we get that guidance, once we get that contact from UK Government.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Philippa Leonard.
Thank you, Leader. What socio-economic challenges are highlighted for the proposed neighbourhood, and how will Pride in Place programme impact the local employment and education in the area?
Alan?
I think that's in two parts, isn't it, Chair, to be honest? Let's pick up on the first part first with what socio-economic challenges are highlighted. If you look through the documentation, the information guides that we have had from UK government to date, they're talking about the funding being used for three main purposes. So that's building thriving places, strengthening communities, and empowering local people to take control. I think if you look at the WIMD data that has been explained by Vicky, you will see very clearly that there are some challenges there that the board can focus on. Let's not forget, though, that the split will probably be much more in favour of capital than revenue. At this moment in time, we believe the revenue element to be around the 30-odd%. So we will be concentrating a lot of the efforts on physical improvements. And I think if you look at some of the towns and villages and community projects that could be taken forward in those areas, that's going to have a massive impact. There was a second part of that, wasn't there, which was about...
There was, how will the Pride in Place programme impact on local employment and education in the area?
I think that's a little bit of crystal ball gazing, but what I will say is that the advice that we've been given on setting up the board centres around the type of stakeholders that should be represented on that board. Explicitly, they mentioned business leaders, and they mentioned people in positions of authority in educational establishments as well. So I think it's fair to say that once that board is set up, that they will have a focus on those two elements as well as several others.
Yeah, Vicky, you've got your hand up, so would you like to come in as well?
Yeah, just wanted to add to obviously what Alan's already said. So not only did I look at WIMD, I also looked at 2021 census data, which obviously is where we get a lot of our socioeconomic background data. So just to give you some kind of highlight figures for this particular area. So it has a larger proportion of people with no qualifications than both the county borough as a whole and the Wales average, quite significantly higher proportion with no qualifications, a significantly lower proportion of residents with levels 3 or 4 qualifications compared with the county borough and Wales. Lower proportion of residents working in what we call the sort of top occupation categories, so things like managers, directors, senior officials, professional occupations, and then conversely more people employed in the sort of lower skilled areas, sort of things like plant and machine operatives and elementary occupations. Less residents are economically inactive, and there's a particular issue around levels of people who are unemployed in the area, who are looking after their home or family, and people who are long-term sick and disabled. So obviously it's about encouraging those kind of groups of residents back into employment. And general health as well appears to be more of an issue than the county borough and Wales as a whole, and a higher proportion of residents with no access to a vehicle, and as we know, parts of our area are more difficult in terms of public transport being not particularly good, expensive, etc., which then reduces the opportunities that residents may have to find work, to travel, to sort of leisure and those type of things. So not only did we look at that WIM data, we also looked at the 2021 census data to kind of back up the identification of the area.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. Any further questions at all? Vicky, did you want to come back in, or was that that was a legacy? I suppose in summary, taking what everybody has said in answer to the questions put forward, in of itself, it's not a panacea. There's funds to radically improve the lives of residents in our more deprived areas, but it is a element of funding. And as a council, we are earmarking this area. over the years, I have been frustrated in systemic deprivation in the same areas all the time, and I'm sure we all want to see all areas of our borough improve and try to equalise that as much as possible, because a more fairer society is a better society, and we will put this area forward and work very closely with the board when they're set up, and look forward to that board forming. Okay, without any further ado, Rob, can we go to the vote, please?
Yes, many thanks, Leader. Members, could you please make your vote on the 3 recommendations contained within the report that's just been explained to you? And Leader, those recommendations are unanimously approved.
Thank you very much, Rob. Okay, item agenda number 4, Council Tax Base 2026 to 2027. And to introduce this report, Councillor Eleni Stenner.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of the report is for Cabinet to agree the calculation of the council tax base for the 26-27 financial year. The council tax base is the annual measure of the relative taxable capacity of different areas within the county borough and is calculated in accordance with prescribed rules. The tax base represents the number of chargeable dwellings in the area expressed as Band D equivalents, taking into account the total number of exemptions, disablement reductions, discounts and premiums, with a net tax base calculated by taking account of the council's estimated collection rate. The tax base is used by Welsh Government as part of the process for calculating the revenue support grant. The report assumes that although the council tax collection rate of 98% is unlikely to be reached by the end of the financial year, it will be met over a period of time. I move.
Thank you, Councillor Stenner. And the second is Councillor Shane Cook.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm happy to second this report, but I have a question, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
This report states that our collection rate is 98%, and Councillor Stenner stated in an introduction that it's unlikely to be reached at the end of the financial year, but will be met over a period of time. Can Officer advise on what steps he will take to ensure that the 98% collection rate is met? Thanks.
Okay. Sean O'Donnell.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Cook. So the council tax in-year rate, which Welsh Government measures more than the combined rate, it won't be met in year, but the council tax team actively pursue all council tax arrears over a period of years, using all the legal options that are available once the matter has been through the magistrates court process that gives us sort of enforcement powers. So we do have evidence to suggest that over a period of around 3 years that 98% is still being reached and above. So on that basis, we made a decision to increase the collection rate to 98% going forward. Pre-COVID levels for collection would have been over a 3-year period around 99%, but they have, since 2020, they have lowered, and that's sort of typical across Wales. We see that with all 22 Welsh LAs, but yeah, we are still achieving 98% over approximately a 3-year period.
Okay. Just on that, Sean, rates reducing, collection rates going down since COVID. I mean, we often hear since COVID, don't we, about many, many things. But all local authorities experiencing, as you say, the same kind of issue. I imagine there's not a silver bullet, answer to all this. But what would you say would be the main factor, or factors generally in that?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I think there's been a culture change, perhaps since COVID, compounded by cost of living crisis. As part of the sort of the All Wales group that I sit on, there's lots of debt that comes back from enforcement agents or bailiffs that's pretty much exhausted all of our collection options, where people are just simply not engaging. And I think that's a cultural thing, because there's lots of advice online in terms of how to avoid answering the door to enforcement agents. But coupled with that, albeit a number of years ago, we used to have committal to prison that used to act as sort of a deterrent. You know, not many people were ever imprisoned for non-payment of council tax, but it was a deterrent. So that was removed from the council tax regulations perhaps about 8 or 9 years ago. But Welsh Government have accepted that perhaps they need to be looking at alternative enforcement measures to tackle this growing council tax debt. And one of the suggestions they're putting forward is maybe sort of local authorities can look to sort of take or affect credit ratings of council tax defaulters. So not on a blanket approach, but sort of on an individual basis. So that's something they're exploring, and maybe we'll look to legislate perhaps in next year at some point.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Any further questions? No? Okay then, in that case, Rob, we'll go to the recommendations and the vote.
Thanks, Leader. Members, could you please vote on the 2 recommendations contained within the report? And those recommendations were unanimously approved, Leader. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. That therefore concludes the meeting. I'd like to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, Nadolig Llawen Pawb, and happy to close the meeting.
Thank you. All over, Joe?
Yeah, well done.
Finished, yeah? Great.